Mid-Ohio Valley Climate Action there in the back. We also have the West Virginia Rivers Coalition and West Virginians for Public Lands at the same table back here. And we have the Sierra Club right over here. And so please feel free to explore those tables and take with you what you will. One thing I want to do to get us started here is I'm going to ask Jane or someone over here, if you'd like, to explain our zero waste event tonight and what we're doing and how to go about everything to contribute to this zero waste effort. So Jane, do you want to take the mic for a minute here? Jane is the queen of zero waste. She is probably the entire reason that we are able to do this.
It used to be called the queen of garbage, so things
Amazing how that changes.
Can you hear me?
It's not got a great.
Climate Action is doing so many amazing things on so many fronts with policy and infrastructure and many strands, and evolving to match the tangible and the food service with what Climate Action is doing. And so in case you've never been to a ZWE, I found out after we got involved in this that a zero waste event is called a ZWE. Z-E-E-W-E-E. So you can tell all your friends and make the culture fun and everybody wants to do it. But anyway, at the far end of the table, at the right end, there's a large paper bag for any paper products, paper cups, waxed paper cups, napkins, and anything paper. Toothpicks can go in there too. And then on the floor is a big box that just says dirty plates and flatware. So Climate Action just acquired these wooden plates, and we'll wash them as many times as they can take it. And other than that, what else do we have? Cups, plates, napkins, toothpicks. They can all, if you happen to come in with a can or a bottle and you want to recycle it, just put it in with the large, heavy paper bag. There's a compost bucket on the right side on the right side also for any food scraps. And I didn't look for a trash can. If there's not one in the room, we may not even need it. So the paper from our name tags can even go in there. So it's fun and easy to make it happen, and there's a place for suggestions at the beginning, at the left end of the table. Other people may know other ways to make the process even more refined and complete. So thank you.
Okay, so just real quickly, a little bit about Mid-Ohio Valley Climate Action. We are a voluntary association on file with the West Virginia Secretary of State's office. We have access to a 501c nonprofit status through our fiscal agent, West Virginia Citizen Action Education Fund. We are a chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby and a chapter of 350.org, and we're also a science booster club for the National Center for Science Education. We recently joined the Appalachian Gas Working Group, which you can learn a lot more about at all three tables in the back. We're very committed. Our mission statement really commits us to education, activism, and coalition building, and those are such important activities to educate on human-caused global climate change, to encourage activism, to tackle this extremely urgent crisis. And the best way to do that is to build coalitions and work together on numerous fronts, which we do really throughout the states of West Virginia and Ohio, and especially in the Mid-Ohio Valley. So we're very, very proud to be here. How things are going to go tonight is we're going to let the candidates introduce themselves. They're going to spend about a minute telling you a little about themselves and what they're running for, why they're running, just candidate introductions of about a minute. Then we're going to take questions from the audience, just a question and answer period. Now this is a smaller, more intimate setting than we're really counting on, so not that we're disappointed by the turnout at all, and we're all interlinked in here, so lots of folks are going to see this. But in terms of participation, it's a more intimate setting than what we were kind of counting on. So you see the red and green placards. You can still, those sheets of paper, you can still hold those up to agree or disagree with what a candidate is saying. Kind of gives the candidates a little bit of feedback in terms of, do you support what they're saying or don't you in this room? We were going to take questions in writing, but with this being a smaller, more intimate setting, what we'll probably do is just recognize people, let them ask their question if they're comfortable. If you still want to write your questions and have someone else ask them, we're happy to do that. But it's not absolutely necessary that we do that. I don't think we really have to worry about boos and hisses and confrontation here tonight or anything like that. I've seen candidates' events go south, but I don't anticipate that here tonight. So without further delay, we will get started with the candidates. And the candidates' names are written here on the board. I did that on purpose to kind of recognize who did show up. We have 27 seats up here for a reason. 27 people were invited because that's how many people are actually running for U.S. Senate, U.S. House, District 1, WV Senate, and WV House Districts 8, 9, and 10. And those are applicable to Wood County. So we invited them all, heard back from some, and the ones we heard back from are primarily here, except for about 2 or 3 who did say that they had legitimate scheduling issues. So we sat 27 seats up here hoping to fill them, but we did the best we could, and we were really appreciative of the people who did show up tonight. So we're going to start, ladies first, with Kendra, and we will work our way down from U.S. House to WV Senate to WV House, and we'll probably, just the way people wrote their names up there, we'll just introduce them here one at a time. We'll just let you know who's coming up next, but we'll start with Kendra Fershee.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you. Oh, did I turn this off?
No, you're good. I think it's
You can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. It really projects, so I can't hear it. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here in Parkersburg with you all, and I'm glad to have an opportunity to talk about environmental issues, which actually, unfortunately, for some reason, don't come up a lot on the campaign trail here in West Virginia when we have obviously a very serious need to be discussing environmental issues. I'm a law professor. I teach at WVU College of Law. I am a mom of 2 kids, one who's 12 and going to turn 13 on Saturday. Pray for me. And a 9-year-old who are in public school in Morgantown. I'm a spouse and the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs at WVU. But I'm running for Congress because I think we need real change in Congress, and I think that in order to change Congress, we need to change who we send there. So I will leave it at that. It's just a 1-minute intro. I'm going to follow the rules and hand off to Tom. Or do you want to, Eric, did you want to do?
I'm sorry, yeah, Tom is fine. Yeah, just the next house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for having me here this evening. It's a great pleasure. This is thrown a little bit in. I was thinking maybe 3 or 4 minutes. It's tough to talk about living in Europe, being in the Army, being in government and industry for a long time in 1 minute. And I doubt if many of you have ever heard of me, much less seen me other than the other candidates. I was born and raised in Kaiser, West Virginia. My family traces its West Virginia heritage to Pendleton County, Virginia, before the Revolutionary War. I served in the regular Army and the Army Reserve for 28 years. My most memorable moment was during the Yom Kippur War. I commanded the Combat Infantry Company, selected to be the first American combat infantry unit to deploy to Tel Aviv. Fortunately for us, just prior to drawing ammunition and boarding the aircraft, the President canceled the mission. I've been an intellectual property attorney and counsel for corporations such as GM, 3M, John Deere, and many others. Well, not many. I guess the most important thing that I can tell you is what my values are. Growing up in West Virginia, I internalized our tremendous West Virginia values, and when combined with those I internalized at West Point, which have personally served me well, are first of all the West Point motto: duty, honor, country. I think in this time of our history, those words are very applicable. And another from the cadet prayer: Lord, give me the strength to do the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be one. I've got some critical issues that I will skip over. West Virginia, thanks here. And,
We have a minute, Tom.
oh, I have a minute.
If you
Okay.
could wrap up, just, yeah.
Yeah. One of the things I'd like to mention is that I think my advantage as a candidate is that I have already established personal relationships with current United States senators, representatives in the Congress. Among them are my West Point classmate, Senator Reed of Rhode Island, and Senators Blumenthal and Murphy of Connecticut. I already know them well, and I can work with them to make things happen in the Congress that have not happened in the immediate past for a long time. And I respectfully request, well, I guess it's suffice it to say, if elected as your representative, I promise on my West Point honor to devote the remainder of my working life for the betterment of our state, each of you, your children, and your grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go in alphabetical order, so if Simon wants to go, since he's standing right there.
Do you think the microphone is working?
It's just coming out of that one speaker.
Yeah, it is.
So- so-
I think that's as loud as it's going to get. I'll speak up. Hi, I'm Simon Hargus. I am running for State Senate District 3. I'm a local business owner for Settlement Physical Therapy. I'm a husband, my wife's right there, Lisa, father of a 2.5-year-old. I like to say I am a living wage, pro-union, Medicare for all Democrat. One thing, the theme of my campaign's been community first. I actually don't like to go into the right versus left and make that the forefront in most topics, but I will point out one thing, and I've gotten to know everybody up here, and I can't say enough good things about the folks that have showed up here tonight. But if you want to pay attention to the empty seats for a sec, I think when we're talking about environmental issues, it's pretty representative of the representation we have in Charleston right now in the majority party. And it's going to be representative of how they're going to negotiate and deal with the energy industries we have coming into our state when it comes to environmental issues. Some of these details on some of these topics, we might not agree on everything, but we're here, we're ready to engage everybody that's here and talk to you guys about it. And that's a stark alternative to the empty seats, which is what we have in the majority party in Charleston. So I think that's really important to just highlight. So I appreciate it, and I really look forward to the evening.
Okay, Jim, go for it.
You beat the buzzer. Good job.
Just barely.
I'm Jim Leach. I'm running for third. Thanks for the food. I was really hungry. So, my family's been from Wood County since 1798, since before climate change was ever dreamed of, before we had the impact on the environment that we have. 2014-15, I went back to law school with my son Morgan. I got a master's in energy law. That master's had a lot to do with environmental law, hazardous waste law, water law, as well as the demand for energy that we have. Kendra's husband, Josh Fershee, was one of the first law professors in energy that I experienced. He says energy law is everything law, and that's what we're facing in West Virginia. We're an energy economy. There's no changing that reality. There's no changing the freight train that's coming with the natural gas play, and we've got to deal with that. With respect to the externalities and everything that comes along with that, those are going to take policy choices in Charleston. We've got a Republican majority. They're full on, let's burn coal, let's do everything that we can to generate every dollar we can, extract every resource we can as fast as we can, ship it as fast as we can. And that's not my view of things. I recognize that reality. I understand, the education that I gained went from energy regulation that's going to affect the Pleasance Power Station, all the activity that's going on to try to save that plant. That's a mixed bag because of the tax base, the jobs, the trades, everybody that's involved. It's hard to support a union and say we should shut this coal plant down. But that's the conundrum that we face, all right? And we're talking about save the grandchildren here. My grandchildren are here. It's one of the pride of my life that Morgan's here in Wood County. My daughter just moved back to Morgantown with her engineer husband. My daughter's in law school. My son's in engineering school in Morgantown. I want them to stay in West Virginia. So that balance in trying to strike what is practical and real versus what is unstoppable You know, we know the tipping point's coming, we know, and people are apathetic, they don't care, they don't pay any attention. Many just absolutely refute the incredible evidence of climate change that exists. I liken it the same thing with cannabis, right? I mean, people say there's no medicinal benefit. We know that there is. That's completely debunked, as is climate change. So if I go to Charleston, that's the balance we're going to try to strike. Thank you.
Okay, we're looking at Mr. Deitzler here first, going in alphabetical order.
I'm Harry Deitzler. I'm seeking one of the 3 seats in the House of Delegates in the 10th District. I'd appreciate your consideration. I went to Kendra's law school, and she does know the environmental stuff backwards and forward. And she's got a tough race ahead of her, and so do you also. And I guess environmentally, I cleaned up the water here because I made a local company. They didn't admit yet that what they put in the water was bad, but I made them clean it out of the water. So at least I have that behind me. On the energy aspect, one of my dear friends has a house in California who's an attorney that did asbestos work. And he has solar panels outside of his house, and in the daytime he feeds into the system, and at nighttime he gets it from energy, which is what we can do with gas. You know, we can use solar in the daytime and then turn on and off the gas plants at night. But what we don't have in West Virginia is a requirement that the power company gives you credit for that when you feed back in. And they have that in California, and we need that in West Virginia. We need to have where I can put solar panels at my house, use them in the daytime, and feed into the system, and then get credit for that by the power company. It's fair and it makes sense. So that's where I stand on energy. I'm Harry Deitzler. I have 2 dogs, a wife, and 2 children. Thanks.
I'm giving you all just a little bit of extra time to even things out because a minute is very fast, so I've been trying to, Kendra, you locked it in within a minute. A little bit of extra
I'll do
time.
my best.
If
Well,
you've
good
got something
evening.
else you want to say. Go ahead, Morgan.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan Leach. I am also from West Virginia for a long time. Our family's been here since the late 1700s, and I'm very proud that I'm still here, and I intend to stay here for a very long time. And the issues that we're facing are, where is the future going? You know, what is climate change going to do to us and our ability to live the lives that we have so far? And so when I went to law school, I was one of the first students in their new Center for Energy and Sustainable Development. It is one of the only programs of its kind. It was developed by Joyce McConnell and some of the others introduced this new program, across the entire United States. So I felt that I really was right place, right time, and learned these really valuable principles and skills. When we look at the concept of developing our resources in a sustainable fashion, we're learning things like, what's a life cycle analysis? How do you account for all the inputs and outputs of any given system, economy, any resource that we're mining, burning, shipping, wherever it's going? I wrote a paper in college about the external cost and the economy of why it is cheaper to buy a tomato that's been shipped from Mexico as opposed to buy it from a West Virginia farmer. And so in that, I really pursued agriculture as what I believe to be one of the major vehicles to help diversify our economy, which is my major campaign platform, but do that in a sustainable way. And so industrial hemp has been a big part of that, developing resources from hemp, plastics, et cetera, in a more sustainable fashion, and that's what I would like to bring to the West Virginia legislature. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Jim Marion. I'm running for the House of Delegates in the 9th District, which is part of Wood County and all of Wirt County. The Wood County part is Mineral Wells, Belleville, Rockport, and going out Route 47 on the right side. But I've lived in West Virginia my whole life, the last 35 years in Mineral Wells. Married, have 2 kids, 2 grandkids. I drove the UPS truck for 27 years for my living, and a proud member of the Teamsters Union, so I will always vote union, no matter what. Now, on climate change, there's issues in the legislature right now. They tried to pass the logging in state parks this past time. It didn't pass, but they will try to do it again. We don't need logging in state parks. We can get logs from other places, from private property owners that want to sell their logs, and we need to tax them. We need a good tax base. We need a good severance tax on oil and gas to help the state out. But I'm willing to listen to anybody, and for the things I don't know about, which is a lot, I expect to come to people that do know about them, like you all. I appreciate your vote, and even if you don't live in my area, you know people that live in Work County or out in Mineral Wells. Thank you.
So we'll go over a little bit of procedure here. So basically what we want to do is we want people to pose their questions. Candidates who want to answer you don't necessarily need the microphone. If you want to stand up and answer, probably the easiest way to go about doing this is if you have a specific candidate who you want to ask the question of, go ahead and address them. If you have just a general question that any of the candidates can answer, then the candidates who decide that they want to answer, if they'll just raise their hand, we'll recognize them and we'll let them answer your question. That's probably the easiest way to go about it. If you want to submit questions in writing, I'll be happy to take them and read them for you. And if you want to ask a question, of course, just raise your hand and we'll address those in order and let the candidates go about doing so. So it's going to be a little bit, like I say, a little bit more of a relaxed atmosphere, and we hope it goes well. So does anyone have a question who wants to start off? Get this thing rolling. Don't all ask at once. Anyone have one in mind? Matt in the back.
I'd like to hear from the state candidates one idea each how they would fund our state parks.
Funding for state parks, and that's for all the state candidates that are up here.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Eric, could you just repeat the question?
Yes, so Matt's question is about funding for state parks and how the state candidates sitting up here want to see that happen. So I think probably the fairest way is to once again go in just alphabetical order, starting with Harry. We're going to pick on Harry all night.
Real quick, probably the same way that we funded Mountainwood Park. It was paid for with coal severance tax. If we have a gas severance tax, we'll have plenty of money for the parks and the raises for the teachers.
Okay. Yeah, let's get through the state candidates answering questions first.
Jim,
And
I
we'll
think
go ahead, Morgan.
Well, I'm just,
You don't all have to go to the mic.
Yeah, that's okay. So a major part of my campaign platform is economic diversification. So we are looking to bring new industry into West Virginia, which translates into more state tax revenue. Something that I've been working on the majority of my career is the industrial hemp industry. And so we hope that not only can that be a very viable industry for West Virginia and create a lot of jobs and revenues for our state that can go to help satisfy a good budget for our state to where we can pay for state parks, but also reduce the demand for timber. I mean, one of the major industries that put industrial hemp out was timber. So we're hoping that we can kind of reverse that a little bit and provide a more sustainable product and a more sustainable economy.
Go ahead, Jim.
Like Harry said, I think the severance tax is the best thing, and I think it needs to be raised up more on oil and gas, which since we're going to be coming into a lot of gas supposedly in the near future. But and we need to promote tourism more. That's the best thing about getting people in this state is tourism. But severance tax mainly, yes.
Sure. I'll say, second the idea that we need to increase the severance tax on oil and gas. I think it's important to get specific about this because one of the arguments that you heard a lot of the logging of our state parks was somehow that's going to help fund our state parks by chopping some of it down. And I think when we get specific on, no, that money can come from somewhere else, I'd also like to get serious on, I think we're having a lot of non-compliance issues with some of these extraction industries, and I think if we can get more serious on the fines for that non-compliance, we can use that money in a lot of places.
Me? Yeah, sure. You know, as far as the severance tax goes, again, facing the need for balance, with regard to severance tax, I'd like to see a tiered tax. We need to encourage in-state development of this natural gas industry for jobs in West Virginia. And that's the central, Morgan and I have a complementary platform here, both with agriculture and energy, and we both share the vision. You know, so for example, the cracker plant out here, and I know with this group, you wonder whether these externalities and whether this impact in West Virginia is worth the economic boon that it will generate. But I think that's one of the things that we look at. We know that this investment is coming. We've all heard about the $83 billion from China. They are meeting currently in Charleston, in Morgantown, with state leaders, with people from West Virginia University to put these plans in place. We need to encourage that, in my view, that economic development in West Virginia. You know, when you look at coal, you look at natural gas. Natural gas, if it's managed properly, is a step down from the environmental impact that coal is. And we've seen a lot of development of coal-fired generation plants. We've seen retirement of the antiquate, you know, the obsolete coal plants, coal-fired plants, and the impact that they have. The clean power plants under attack. But those, so that's one aspect. You know, I mean, cutting down timber to improve our state parks is an oxymoron, okay? It just doesn't make sense. And I, to the credit of our department, the commissioner of our Department of Agriculture, he stood pretty strongly against that and was able to kind of lead the charge to put that bill down. If we're elected, we're going to continue to oppose that type of approach to fund our state parks. But the same thing Morgan said with the revenue from cannabis. It's a tremendous, brand new revenue source for West Virginia. And it's not just the medical marijuana. We've all heard about the stories with Colorado and everything that's going on there and the revenue that's generated. We've also heard some stories about that's had some negative impacts in Colorado in some different ways. Cannabis, hemp is a different issue. All right, that's food, it's fiber, and it's nutraceuticals, it's medicine. And the farmers, we were at the Farm Bureau meeting a couple of nights ago. We stopped by a Grange regional meeting a few weeks ago. We talked with them, and they really don't know anything about it. You know, their grandfather's grandfather grew hemp, but they've lost that just like we've lost the seed genetics. And Morgan introduced a bill. Now we have one of 3 states in the United States where we are allowed to develop hemp seed genetics. Once these farmers realize the opportunity that they have for this type of a cash crop and the demand that's coming. Coca-Cola is talking about doing a CBD-infused beverage. All right, CBD is healthful. Folks, it helps, it's a prophylactic for Alzheimer's, for Parkinson's, for epilepsy, because we're wired for it. It's in our DNA. Very few people realize we have cannabis receptors in our bodies, all right? And so the fact that it was artificially removed from our economy for 80 years doesn't erase the 10,000 years before that it was a staple. Every founding father spoke about the value of the hemp crop to our economy, and it's true and it's real. But if we do, as we've done so many times, we are late to the party in West Virginia. Kentucky just broke ground on a $40 million processing lab for industrial hemp, nothing to do with marijuana, whatever your opinion is on that one way or the other. I do support medical marijuana. I think its time has come. It's definitely a benefit for our bodies, for our citizens, for our economy. So with respect to how to fund these things, I think that the responsible development of this energy play, the responsible development of our agricultural play are going to bring revenue so that, and then also to incentivize the development of those industries in West Virginia. We need to get off our butts and go to work.
Thank you. Does someone have another question? Jean, go ahead.
I'd like to talk about natural gas. You kind of brought it up. We need to have a really important, deep conversation about this. We happen to be sitting on a bunch of gas here in our place. We know methane is more than 80 times worse than CO2 in terms of greenhouse gases and exacerbating our existential climate crisis. But we happen to be sitting on a ton of gas that people say is a way to wean ourselves off of coal. Only if the leaks are 1% or less. And the industry owns up to 3 or 4%. And when you drive to Clarksburg, you can smell gas from the Ritchie County line, or before the Ritchie County line, all the way to Salem. Yeah. So there's gas leaking all over the place, all over the state of West Virginia. In the environmental world, there's a lot of energy being spent on stopping pipelines, stopping various things. What I hear people saying in this room is that there's an inevitability to this development in West Virginia, that we have to be realistic about this. And so I guess what I'm wanting to know from all of you, because this is at the federal and state level, is how do we get ourselves, what are steps that we can take that acknowledge the sacrifices that people in places like ours make and have made for 100 years. My grandfathers were coal miners, and they died of black lung, both. And they never wanted any of their grandkids to have anything to do with it. How do we acknowledge their sacrifices, but open up a path to the future that is healthy and doesn't kill the planet? So what's your advice to us, I guess I would say, that we should support you on when the consequences are so dire? And I'd like to hear everybody respond to that. What do we do with gas? What's the orientation? What's the attitude we should have toward it? Because it's killing us. The gas is killing us. Killing my kids, my grandkids, your grandkids. And you can't just say the Chinese are coming with $83 billion. That's not a good enough answer.
Okay, let's start with the federal candidates. We'll start with Kendra and we'll go to Tom.
So, as with anything, this is a matter of political will. There's a stepping stone process in this that I think we need to acknowledge. The first step is that we don't even know what the damage is, potentially, because we don't permit, at this point right now, there's a lot of study, a lot of research that is not being done or is being manipulated in a way to really keep us from what the potential damage is. So we need to know exactly what the problem is and exactly how to address it. And then we need to have the political will to not be drawn into it's economically plus for West Virginia, therefore it must happen. Because when that is how we sort of look at our environmental concerns, we find ourselves on a one-track path that keeps us from developing industry that is environmentally friendly, and it keeps us from appropriately taxing that which we have here. So, two things I want to say. One, if we are going to get our natural resources out of the ground, we need to make sure that whatever it is that we tax that material at will pay for any of the negative repercussions of it. And and we can do that. We can raise those taxes. You know why? Those businesses aren't going to leave. Of course they're not. We have the gas. We have the coal. We have the oil. They could pick up and go somewhere and say, well, fine, we're not taking it out of the ground, but where are they going to go? The gas doesn't go with them. So they'll pay to get it out of the ground. The other thing I'll say is that we can look to model states, Colorado, for example. Colorado, we could be the Colorado of the East, and Colorado could be the West Virginia of the West. There is no reason why Colorado is seeing its economic boom and we're not, other than a lack of political will to address the reality in front of us with respect to the environmental harms that come from economic development of different industries. So I'm not willing to say, my husband is an energy law professor, and he thinks about these things in terms of it's his job to think about things from every angle. And so he's balancing the interests of, keeping the lights on, right? And making sure that West Virginia is not treated as it has been, with the extraction industries taking the materials, shipping them out, leaving almost no money behind, but leaving an environmental, disaster in certain areas behind. So I'll stop there. Obviously, you can go on and on, but
Thank you.
I'll leave it to Tom.
Well, you covered it fairly clearly there. I do agree with the Colorado model, especially in the case of marijuana. Marijuana is legal marijuana, both for medical purposes and for recreational purposes, would add about $300 million to the West Virginia budget.
Well, is that an answer, you saying that's an answer to natural gas? Because my question was about natural gas.
I'm about to get to natural gas.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to get marijuana in there because it also natural gas also tracks into Colorado, which so does marijuana. Natural gas should not be that big a problem. Number one, it's a very valuable resource. It has many, many uses in industry. So the fact that we're having trouble maintaining the level of leakage of methane, I think that is solvable and can be done. But as Kendra keeps mentioning, it's a legislative will. And we need to have really, truly honest regulations and the enforcement of the regulations. When Reagan took over as president, he talked about what he was going to do with the environmental agency, right? Well, he didn't fund it. So they didn't do much, did they? So if you don't fund that sort of thing, then you're not going to get much help. We've got to be sure that that is done, that we, fund it and properly, and we enforce it properly. Now, I don't know if that should work, but it requires a lot of work. And that's what I would do.
Let's move on to state senate candidates. Simon, if you want to go, since Jim spoke last between the two of you.
Sure, and specific to natural gas, I think the industries have a habit, and I think you pointed both these out in your question. They can hide behind two things. There's a question mark that they can hide behind because with regard to methane, right? We know it's a much more potent climate warming gas, but it's not being monitored. We don't know how much is there. So that question mark we're going to have to chip away at and eliminate by requiring real monitoring and real assessments. And at this point, they can't even tell you where all the abandoned wells are, and so when we get in there, when you're starting to push back on this, and I don't, my attempt here is also to say there's hope, and there's a way to do these on a grassroots level that we can get together and actually affect change. So, a lot of them is to push back against the idea that, okay, might be a way to make natural gas a cleaner gas than coal, but you're going to have to follow these steps, and you're going to have these monitoring places. You're going to have to set aside this amount of money for inspectors. Charleston's complicit in this kind of, well, we have these regulations, so don't worry about it, but we don't have the inspectors or the funding for the inspectors to even know what we're doing with methane. We have to challenge that idea, and we have to challenge the idea that this is necessarily cleaner until you prove to us that it is. And part of the money you're making is going to go back into a system that is inspecting it. And we also have to reject the notion that it can be self-inspected. and really call that out for what it is. So that question mark needs whittled away, and we can do that as a grassroots effort and push back on that. And I think the other thing that they often hide behind, and I think it was pointed out, is there's this myth that if we push back on this, they're going to leave. And so when we come here and say it's inevitable, don't take that as something to be discouraged about. Take that as something that this is inevitable. This is also a good that's fairly inelastic, right? So we can push on this. We can regulate it. We can tax it, and it's not going to leave. And I think that's also a first step to push the public perception back that we have to somehow walk around on eggshells, or the natural gas industry has such thin skin that it's going to disappear tomorrow. That's not the case, and we need to be able to articulate that's not the case. And the other final thing that I really hopefully interjects hope into a group like this, because I think it's done it before, and it might be hard to do on the methane specifically, because that's going to cause testing that we might not have access to. But there's other rules and oversight, especially when you're talking about pipelines and the requirements they have in terms of the type of clearing they have to do to take those pipeline throughs. There's observational, community-based oversight that we can provide. We can go through the regulations. We can get drones and say, hey, you know what? This isn't to spec. We know the specs. It's not. Here's the date. Here's the timestamp. Here's the footage. Turn it in. And we can start generating some of that money that can then go to a real inspection process, so it's not community-based. And I say that because, there's ways from a ground-up, grassroots way to push back on this, but there's also ways to do that that's not so hopeless. I think there is hope there for us to be able to do this, and do this in an environmentally friendly way. So please don't take it when we say this is inevitable as that's necessarily a negative thing. That actually gives us some silver linings and some leverage on some stuff. Okay? Thanks.
Jim? My turn. So there's basically 25 trillion cubic feet of proven reserves in West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. When you talk about if we regulate the gas industry out of our state, they'll just go somewhere else. You have to face there is some reality to that. If there's favorable drilling rights in Ohio or Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania has the largest gas play. But that kind of misses the mark, all right, because climate change is not a regional issue. It's not even an environmental issue. It's a global issue. So it doesn't matter where the methane is released, all right? It affects us all globally. The largest source of uncontrolled and regulated methane release is from antiquated infrastructure. We've got two types of pipeline in the ground. We've got transmission, we've got distribution. Transmission is regulated by FERC on the national level. They have eminent domain power. They're the ones that can shove this pipeline across your property. The new pipeline that we see staged everywhere up to 42 inches, all right, is just that new. Now you're going to have releases when you develop this natural resource. And when going back to Kendra's point of political will, the political will right now in West Virginia is absolutely to extract it with all due speed. I don't agree with that, all right? I mean, there's no reason we have to have this. Do you realize the United States uses 25% of the total world energy resources? A more telling statistic is 95% of the world population still relies on biomass for energy. So it's just the developed, whatever you want to call, civilized cultures that are the energy suck, all right? A very small percent of our population. So how do you do this? Number one, well, first of all, I think that we need a collaborative effort between the players with this Marcellus so these corporations don't play us off against each other, all right? And that we all come together and recognize that we've got a future to protect and that we are not going to be played by the Chinese, by whomever's got the dollars, and that we're just going to be a slave to that. So also one of the things that we need to do is with this development of such a large source of natural gas is to force some of that to go into this aging infrastructure. I remember, Jamie Van Nostrand, a class that we had, and we do have measurements and we can track, and I can't remember if it's satellites but there is a way for us to track where these methane releases are coming from, and most of it, of course there's going to be somewhat development. A lot of these guys are flaring it off, but most of it is from these ancient gas lines that we have that are just simply leaking. And so if, one political will, purpose that we could pursue is say, not only are we going to take the severance tax and how, there's the concept of the carbon tax where you tax it when it comes out of the ground, okay? You just start right there. Every piece of energy that comes out of the ground pays the externalities of that life cycle when it comes out of the ground, all right? I support that, all right? And so it's obviously a complex issue. Like I say, energy law, nobody wants a life to go off. Isn't it a great hypocrisy that we enjoy all the fruits of this energy at the same time that we malign it and say that it's going to ruin our future? Those are hard choices, and I keep coming back to what Kendra says. It's a matter of people waking up and understanding what's going to happen and not just voting their pocketbook.
Who wants to jump up first for the House? We'll just kind of make this easy of the three of you. Morgan, you want to go ahead? We'll just go down the line. Morgan,
We'll put Harry up first every time.
We'll leave Harry to last this time.
Here, I'll walk up here so let's keep turning your camera.
So, West Virginia politics and how are we going to keep the gas industry honest, right? How are we going to make sure that they're accounting for all the externalities that come with the business that they come here to do? Well, first thing Jim Justice says when he gets into office, other than he's a Democrat, he says the DEP is going to stop telling industry no. That's the first thing he says. He's putting his hands up as the cold guy he is and said, DEP is not going to tell the industry no. That's not the policy that's benefiting West Virginia. We have incredible resource, but there's incredible responsibility that goes along with developing that resource. And, I have, and through my time in school, really delved into these regulations. They are long, complex, complicated, to the point they're almost unworkable. And especially lacking a budget then to actually go out and enforce this. I mean, you've got some serious issues here of just simply non-compliance. I mean, self-reporting, that's a joke. That's not going to work for the citizens. That works for the industry, doesn't work for us. So how do we start to kind of be creative about this and say, well, if compliance is the issue, what are we going to start to do here about keeping the industry honest? I think empowering citizens, through citizen reporting, creating better mechanisms for that, citizen lawsuits, because at some point they're going to have to pay attention. And if it's not from a bunch of activists, out there blocking a pipeline, a lawsuit will certainly get your attention on that. So that making sure that the regulations that are in place are executed as they were written to be. Other than that, I think that instead of just focusing on let's pipe it out or let's burn it, let's manufacture it. Let's create products from it. Then you're not just, flaring off the resource, just getting to the best parts of it, and anything else that doesn't really fit into my business model as the gas man, who cares about it? Let's find some better uses for it. And with the technology that we have and the products, sustainable products of the future, I mean, I think that we can find higher and better uses that have less and less of a footprint. And that would be my position, and I would be working on policies to help effectuate that goal.
I don't drive a lot on 77, but every time I go between Route 50 and Route 47 on 77, I smell methane, and it's coming from the dump. I don't know what can be done about that.
There's that too, yes.
Okay. And that doesn't have anything to do with drilling, but that's pollution.
That's true.
Right there. Enforcement and stiffer fines. I welcome business. I want business. I want to put people to work. But it has to be good business that puts in a good pipeline that doesn't rupture. They talked about how safe that pipeline in South Dakota, North Dakota, and they've already had 2 or 3 ruptures of it already. You know, we don't need that. And we have to do it safely. We want the business, but we have to do it safely, and we have to tax it to get money as it leaves this state, whether it be coal, gas, or oil. But, you know, pollution-wise, you know, this methane there, I assume it's from the dump. I would hazard a 90% guess that it's coming from the dump. And as far as I know, they do not do anything about that.
Well, they flare it off.
Well, they try to burn some of it off,
Yeah.
but that's very little that's getting burned off. When I can smell it on the interstate and it about, you know, gags you sometimes, you know there's a bunch of it coming from there. But, you know, I believe what most of the other people said, but enforcement and having good, truthful organizations and not people that will take bribes mainly to do the enforcement and checking on these gas companies. Thank you.
A real quick law school class here. There are 2 paths that we can follow. One path is legislative, one path is the court system. They are separate. If you Google public justice, I'm past president of the national public interest law firm Public Justice. We brought the first and only successful mountaintop removal lawsuits in the state of West Virginia, and we did that in the court system. We didn't win all of them. We won a few, and we made some change. But that's done in the federal court system. The president appoints the judges that are in that federal court system. The only way that people in this room can make a difference in the court system is to get people active and vote for the right people in that are going to choose our federal judges, because that's where the environmental decisions are going to be, in the court system. Legislatively, if I'm going to make any change, I can't go down there and just yell. I have to get 51 votes. Simon and Jim have to get 18 votes. And the vote that we have down there right now, who has been quoted as saying, I don't need to listen to my constituents because God put me in this office. I don't think you know who I'm talking about, do you? That is never going to allow any kind of regulation of industry. That vote is never going to allow any taxation of the gas going out of here. That vote is going to say, I'm going to reduce taxes and raise services, which is an absolute idiocracy. My job for you is to go down there and figure out how I can get 51 votes. And you have to understand very much that every one of these people that you would like to put in office has the same challenge. They will not always be able to vote the way you want, because they will have to compromise to get what you do want. I served on I ran for Attorney General and the voters voted I was much better qualified to be in private practice, so I had to get a job. And the job ended up being in Charleston, so I got stuck running the Kanawha City youth football team, and to save their field, I had to run for city council. So for 8 years, I was on Charleston City Council, 27 of us. My law partner, Kent Carper, who's the commissioner down there, said, you can go down there and raise all kind of cane. You can be on the front page for 4 years, assuming I was only going to be there for 4 years. And you'll get all kind of name, people know who you are. You won't accomplish a darn thing. If you really want to have an impact, you have to get together with the other people, get together with the mayor, whether you agree with them or not, and work with them. That's the challenge, and it's a big challenge that we have here in West Virginia. But we have to work with the tools in our toolbox And we're going to have to get people that can work and get 51 and 18 and the governor, or we're never going to do it. We have to, when we did the DuPont case, their internal guideline for C8 was 1 part per billion in the water. When they found out they were going to be held accountable, they paid off well, I won't say they paid off, since we're on the camera, right? They had the West Virginia person in the DEP, Deanne Stats from here, form a CAT team that said 150 parts per billion was safe, which we all know is ridiculous. We just got Vienna's water cleaned up, so forth. But until we get the regulatory bodies to do what they're supposed to do, until we get the legislation, none of this is going to change. We can raise Cain all we want in this room. We can yell and scream, we can get on the front page. It's not going to change until we get people in the legislature that will hold these bodies accountable. And I think all the people in this room that showed up today are in that category. And I can, after my daughter learned about what was going on when she went down there for the teacher strike, I can tell you the ones that aren't in this room aren't the least bit interested in what we're talking about here. But don't forget, court system is one. We brought the only lawsuit in Ritchie County, my law firm did, to try to hold them accountable for what they were doing with all the drilling, the tearing up the highways. Down in southern West Virginia, we had a battle where they're tearing up the roads, and we want to, the coal companies are taking, as has been said, they're taking the resource and not paying their fair share. They're dumping that back on the citizens. We had that with the mountaintop removal. They bought the houses they could, burnt them, and then chased out the other people, and then rained coal down on the others. We've got to hold them accountable for the costs of their industry. We are not going to scare them off, because our natural gas actually has some characteristics that the other gas doesn't have, but either way they need it. We have to have people that have the guts to tax them and make them pay their fair share. And I don't have the solution for the substitution, but if we're going to have it, which I don't think we can get out of right now, we need people that are going to make them pay their fair share. I'm sorry I went so long on that.
Okay,
I
thanks.
didn't really mean to.
It's okay, thank you. Before we get to, I've got 2 questions right here. I just want to say very quickly before we get, because we're going to start with these questions. One thing that this group emphasizes, and I think that Mid-Ohio Valley Climate Action emphasizes, and I think that we want to emphasize here tonight, is that we are in the midst of a climate crisis that demands immediate action. So, as Harry said, we really appreciate you all being here tonight, because it does show your interest in taking immediate action and the importance of doing that. And so I wanted to interlude and kind of piggyback on what he said there. It's an urgent crisis. It's a global crisis, but it's as much a local one in the Mid-Ohio Valley as it is the rest of the globe. So we have to be having these conversations. I saw Kim's hand first, and then Judy.
I just want to interject in some of the discussion here. You know, we're talking about methane, but another really important resource here in our state and this country is water, which is at crisis in the world right now. And we think we have a lot of fresh water here in West Virginia, but the millions and millions of gallons that are being wasted right now and permanently poisoned is really phenomenal. I mean, the water sources that are being utilized. We live along the most polluted river in the country, and this is a crisis level right now. Fly over the state. It is heartbreaking to fly over the state and see what's happened to our mountains and our streams and our valleys and stuff. But the question that I have is, I really believe that one of the core problems in this country is election and lobbying reform. It's very, very needed. And so the question that I have is, you know, where do you see the role of election reform and election funding reform of candidates and the lobbying and the money that's going in could play a role in terms of the really dirty stuff that's going on in the state in terms of the extraction industries? I mean, pretty much they're writing the laws, handing them to people that they've given money to and said, this is what we would like you to put, while in the short term, electing people who won't allow that to happen is fine, but that still is leaving the door open that in 2 more years or 4 more years, without election reform, this is going to come up again. And it's not a good history that we have on clean elections in this state. And it's to me, that is a core of turning things around, is honesty and openness. And it just, where do you see that has a role in it in terms of your candidacy and what you're going to put in front?
Okay. I guess the lawyers should address that. They changed the law and made it so that the people, the corporations that donate to these super PACs don't have to reveal who they are. They don't have to reveal where their money comes from. And that way they can put who they want in office. That law was changed by Congress, and it's not going to be changed back until we get a Congress that'll change it back. So we fought that tooth and nail. We fought it even in the court system. And when they let these donors hide who they are, the public doesn't even realize what's going on. The same thing in the DuPont case. When the lawsuit is brought against them, they hired the people from the EPA. They paid them more and attracted them from the EPA, and then paid them to have the people at the EPA make announcements that the chemical was safe. It's the same thing you're talking about here. That if you don't know who's actually running things and they can conceal it, and the only way we can change that is to get people in Congress and in the Senate who will change it.
Tom started to stand up.
Sure, get to Simon.
Yeah, I think that we're perhaps missing one thing here, and that is the Supreme Court of the United States. Right now, we're we're waiting for Justice Stevens to decide whether to retire at 81, and the right has a 5-4 advantage. Am I correct on the balance of the Supreme Court right now?
Yeah,
5-4.
it's not Stevens, though.
Yeah, the swing guy.
Breyer or Kennedy?
Kennedy. Well, I'm not, but I do know that if we're going to get anything changed, we got to get rid of the Republicans. I mean, let's be truthful about this. And the only way you can do that is vote. And we've got to get people out to vote and change not only representatives, which I have an interest in, but in all levels of government, state, federal. But when you have 9 people that are there and they make decisions at the level of the Supreme Court, we need to have more Democrats appointed federal, not federal, but Supreme Court justices. And that is where we're really getting behind right now.
And I agree with everything that's been said, but something I'd add, just coming at it from the other end, to empower people in something we can do now while we're waiting on a sea change with the Democrats, is to stop letting it be socially acceptable to take this money. And that's something that people can have a say about while we're waiting on Democrats to be elected. And I think we saw an incredible example of that with Lisa Lucas in this state that made national news when she got up there and just started reading off where some of these folks were getting this money from and got ushered out of Charleston, right? If we can have more action like that, if we can advocate and force a very transparent, here's where this politician is getting his money, and be vocal about it. It's not actually, people don't want to see their politicians taking that money, but it's kind of hidden under the rug. I think we need to follow that kind of Lisa Lucas footsteps with our politicians and get very vocal and very loud and present look where these people are getting this money from. Look at how much of their money is from PACs. That's public information, but we're not making it public, right? And if we can push back in that way and not make it socially acceptable to do this, and make it, and have people lose political capital when we talk about it. And I was trying to, I don't have a great grasp on every Republican leader. Somebody help me with the name. There's the tax pledge the Republicans did that had a lot of power, and there was a gentleman behind that. Grover Norquist. Look how much power that pledge had in that party and on politicians. And that wasn't through legislation. That wasn't waiting on the Congress. We need something like that to address this problem of money in politics. Because, you know, with Citizens United really changed the game. We have to have that come from a different direction. And we need to start pledges like that. Who are you taking money from? Will you pledge not to take that money? And making it public when you do. And if we push back on that and make it costly enough for politicians when they do take that money, we can make that change. And we don't always have to wait for Democrats to have the majority. And that can be now, that can be this election. And I think we saw it in what Lisa Lucas was able to do. And it caught on like wildfire in just that 30 seconds she's allowed to talk, or however long they let her be up there. So I think we need more action like that. We need to expect our politicians to do it. And I think that can be a really encouraging and empowering process.
So I think that one of the things that we need to keep in mind, and something that I keep saying a lot on the campaign trail as someone who has a lot less money than my opponent, is that money doesn't vote. And money is a proxy, right? That sends a signal, and I can tell you every time there's been, well, not every time, but most of the cycles where we report how much money we've brought in, which is good transparency. There's a newspaper article, it's like the old horse race article, right? Every political race was reduced to what the polls are saying, and then people make their decision on the basis of a popularity contest. We have moved toward a money contest. So whoever can write the bigger check out of their own bank account or out of the money that they're able to bring in from special interests or from people who are buying the politician and not an individual who has integrity, has the sort of compass of their constituents, the more vulnerable we are to this big actor in the field controlling our political forces. So I think I think there's a very good argument that Congress should respond to Citizens United by creating laws that that work either toward public funding for campaigns, or at least in the interim, create much more transparency about where the money is coming from. Lisa Lucas was incredibly effective at doing, not because necessarily she did anything really that innovative, it was because she got hauled off the floor. In a free country with the First Amendment, she was removed for speaking the truth. That's where we are. Which means we need to combat that as strongly as the forces that are looking to silence the Lisa Lucases of the world. And it starts in Congress. The Supreme Court made a grave error with Citizens United. I don't see the Supreme Court changing that anytime soon. It could, but I don't believe that it will. So Congress can respond in different ways that are consistent with the Constitution, but require more transparency and public funding, if that's the will of the people. But I'm not taking corporate PAC money. I've made that pledge, and I think we need to be electing people, going back to finishing where I started, we need to be electing people who understand that money doesn't vote. What matters to me is you in this room, not the dollars, because you can combat that with your voices.
Okay, we're going to go over to Judy's question here.
Okay, I actually have two. One is off topic, one is on topic. The first one, off topic, is what would you do to ensure that women have control of their health care issues and that all West Virginians, or in Kendra's case, Americans, have adequate medical care.
I am going to have to say that this is climate, energy, environment, so you can talk with them about the
Okay.
off-topic afterward, but let's focus on that.
Eric, I'm actually going to jump into her question. I didn't get a chance to speak.
Oh, okay, go ahead,
Just
yeah.
I'll be
I
very
have
brief.
one that's on topic.
Well,
Okay.
let me finish.
If you
because I wanna
answer hers real
respond to
quickly,
hers
then
briefly.
Judy can ask her.
Right, you know, because this is something that's important to me. I'm a being a city council right now. We don't have too many lobbyists coming around, all right? This is a picture of the Ohio River in September of 2015 when we had the algae plume. All right, that's from fertilizer runoff. I'm a big river guy. I mean, I'm a supporter of High River Foundation. I swim in the river, my kids do, and I understand what you're talking about, and the bacteriologicals and everything we deal with. But with respect to I think the issue with campaign finance and reforms, it's got to start by example. Now, you know, I'm with Kendra. I don't even have a donate button on my website. All right, I'm just trying. I mean, I didn't grow up with money, but I worked hard in my life, and I'm willing to pay for the service that I'm trying to earn. And Morgan and I inspire each other, you know, in this mission. He doesn't have the same luxury. He needs a couple of campaign donations, okay? But you know, but so with respect to that, I think it is, you know, the mean-spiritedness that's crept into politics. I find very distasteful. And I think that the best thing that we can do, it all starts at home, is individually, just by example. You know, to be civil, to do like Harry is talking about. All these candidates have great ideas about this. You know, you can't do it alone. You have one vote, all right? And so you either have to, you know, you stick to your principles, set your example, and try to live by that, and try to bring people along with you. And if you can do that, to me, that's the best opportunity we have to move off of this mean-spirited politics that we have in America today.
Judy, go ahead and ask your
Okay.
question.
Would you support a bill to alter the building code to make all new and severely renovated construction solar ready? It would be things like orientation, strengthening roof and walls, and limiting the height of trees around the thing. Would you support that so that when the solar panel technology really comes into bloom, we're ready for it? It's absolutely ridiculous to take good fields and put solar panels on them. When there are all these nice shopping center malls and school malls and stuff like that that are just ready for them if they're properly adapted.
Ready to be adapted. Anyone want to start? Show of hands.
I can do it. You and I agree on just about everything, and so you know where I'm coming from here. Whatever we do with regard to setting a rule, it has to be somewhat flexible because there are some facilities that would not be amenable to it and others that would. I agree in concept with what you are saying. The question of workability, it's easy to say the concept. It's much more difficult to put it into a legislative enactment that is workable across the board. There are some, let's say for example, over here at Marie's House to Home that I've donated to. You say, well, they're going to build a new house. Well, they have to do this. You know, they're going to be lucky to get enough money to put the building there. So I mean, you have to be careful how you lay out a blanket rule that affects everybody. And I think what you're saying can be done, and I would support that. But Kendra, as a teacher, it's tough to write these laws so that they're going to fit and be workable. But yes, I support what you're saying.
But I suspect right now that my neighbors would scream if I put solar panels on my roof because they would be in the front yard.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's true. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So maybe what should happen is that the zoning should be more amenable to solar usage instead of adversarial.
Yes, but that's going to be pretty much at the municipal level.
Yeah.
but it also could be done at the state, I suspect.
It can be done at the state level if you get me 50 more votes.
I thought it'd be just
Like in the ordinance that was before the city of Parkersburg that didn't pass, they didn't get enough votes. That same ordinance we passed in Charleston unanimously. you have to get the votes before you can get it done. But you all have an advantage that we won't have. You can do like Eric and write letters and bring these things to people's attention because you don't have to get a consensus. It is important when you do that, though, to try to put it in a context that the people in the middle will say, hey, you got a good point there. I think I can go along with that. If we go too far, then they don't even read it. And what we learn as trial lawyers is people don't believe what they hear what they believe. If we promote something that they don't believe, they don't debate it, they don't even hear it. So be careful how you frame your message.
Anyone else want to answer Judy's question directly? Offer anything? Okay, we had another question over here from Daryl.
Yeah, this is for the federal candidates, right? One of the actions that the so-called president took in his war with China was to impose I think it was a 25% tariff on solar panels, right? China is by far the largest manufacturer of them, so just putting a tariff on it, immediately increases the cost of putting solar on your roof, like we talked about, right? So for the federal candidates, do you have any specific policies that you would push in the new Democratic majority to move us towards a renewable economy?
Well, let's start with Tom this time, just so, and then we'll go to Kendra.
A totally renewable economy?
Yes.
I thought we were looking at solar panels. That's certainly one. Now, my understanding is that the economics is what is driving the solar panels in China versus the solar panels being made in the United States. China actually just wiped out our market, home market, pretty much so. It's very limited, as I understand it, compared to what it was. So this would be a point where putting a tariff on importing Chinese solar panels sounds good. And if given enough time, it could work. But then you have to have a capacity still available in the U.S. to pick up that difference in the number of solar panels manufactured. That would be great if we could manufacture those that were subject to the 25% tariff in the United States and they were no longer manufactured in China. I'm not sure that that's going to work out as best we would hope. But I would certainly try to encourage more solar panels being made in the United States. The more things we can make in the United States, the better off we are, we will be. I don't know if that answered your question, but as far as solar panels go, I mean,
Well, no, the question wasn't about solar panels, but it was more about what else, in addition to solar panels, would you, as a new Democratic congressman, be looking to implement?
For renewable.
Yes. Yes.
well, I mean, we have windmills, technology. I would be looking at technology capable of converting something other than oil and gas into energy. And who knows what's out there technology-wise will be there in a year to 5 years to 10 years. We don't know what that will be. Could be, did you ever see a windmill before, back in the 1950s? When I was, one of those, the running around up in the hills of Kaiser, West Virginia. I mean, I never saw one before. So, solar panels, I never heard of them either. I mean, as far as what was commercially available and could be used by homes. And the efficiency of those things is increased exponentially from when they were introduced 20 years ago. So technology is always going to be pushing us.
So I think that this is a matter of economic decision-making. If we want to incentivize renewables, we should have a renewable portfolio standard. We should have decision-making that is geared toward developing economic models that bring in renewable energy sources into places like West Virginia where we need jobs. So we can be an energy state, but we can be an energy state that is the locus of manufacturing of the things that we need for renewable energy to be happening throughout the country. We also need to think about transmission. If we are, for example, if we are creating electricity, we need to be able to get it from place to place. We have the utility system and the Rural Electrification Act that made it possible to move that energy, sort of source from one place to the next. But we don't have a way necessarily to capture what comes off of our renewable energy sources and get it to where it needs to be. So we need to be thinking about renewables from bottom to top, from generation to use. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, there is a brewery. I actually took my husband there for his 40th birthday in Colorado called New Belgium Brewery. And a huge portion of that complex is run off of renewable energy because it was made a priority by the people who run the business. And it created jobs. So they have solar panels on the roof of their bottling plant. They have a recycled water facility that allows them to clean the water and reuse it for certain parts of the process. And they also buy a certain amount of money or a certain amount of electricity off of the renewable grid. If we make it a priority, we will be able to make it happen. So Congress has obviously a huge role in this. And the way that we fix it is the way that we encourage it is we send people there who are willing to engage in the process of thinking of the foundation to the use of renewable energy. And right now we have a representative who's unwilling to do that. We have, one track, only one battle we're allowed to fight when it comes to the war that we are currently in with respect to our economy in West Virginia. And I'd like that battle to be diversified. I want more resources put toward every kind of energy source we can think of that is less damaging on our land.
Thank you. If I can interject here and ask my own question. First of all, does anyone else have one before I do that? Okay, I don't want to jump on top of anybody here. From a personal perspective, we've been talking a lot tonight about natural gas development, oil development, petrochemical development as a byproduct of that, including plastics, which the world is drowning in. Would any of you, going to the state legislature or Congress, be willing to advocate on a basis that says any fossil fuel, natural gas and oil included, understanding that we sit on a shale belt, we have to transition away from this as quickly as possible? Because the reason I'm asking you this question, we have the capacity right now, with the advancement of battery storage, with the advancement of solar, wind, to a lesser degree water, geothermal, biomass technologies, but mostly solar and wind, to meet nationwide 80 to 100% of our energy capacity needs if we had, as Kendra mentioned, the transmission, and if we had the ability to store energy as the battery technology is coming along and lowering in price. You've heard of the Tesla home packs, you've heard of these various different things. So what I'm asking, to sum it up, is are you capable of going to the state legislature and Congress and saying, we have a climate crisis here, we are in an urgent, potentially existential situation, we must act, the Paris Climate Accords were great, We're not even acting on those. This administration is backing out of those, and even those, you could argue, were not enough. We must speed this transition to renewables, to sustainability, to energy efficiency, sustainable development in agriculture. We must speed this transition as much as possible. Could you advocate a position like that and advocate for policy that would lead down that road at the state legislature or in Congress? And any one of you can jump in first. You better. We haven't heard from Morgan for a while. Let's start with you.
Yeah, I can stay here.
Yeah, you're good.
You know, I thought that, I'm obviously not a big Trump fan right now, but I thought one of the worst things that he did was pull back out of Parkersburg. I thought that was one of the best things that Obama did because of that exact problem, the transition. We know that we can't just say, turn the coal-fired power plants off, turn the gas plants off. We're going all off the grid. It's just not feasible. But only the policy is what's going to drive us to that transition. We know that. We know that we're going to have to get there. And where do we start? We start with policy. It's the political will that we've been talking about tonight. They're all one-track mind. It's the war on coal. It's this and it's that. It's not that. It's about all of us coming together, working a good plan to where we use the resources, we use them responsibly. I'm saying we're going to use our natural gas play. Let's use some of those materials to build solar panels. Let's put in policies that help incentivize your ability to get a solar panel on your roof. Let's improve the net metering. Let's improve the tax credit that you get for investing in solar energy, not only residentially but commercially. And it's something that's not one huge fix. It is a piece by piece by piece fix. So every small victory in this is really going to count. And you've got to get people in there, one, who understand the issues. That is certainly the issue. West Virginia has other resources other than gas. Actually, geothermal is a big potential play for West Virginia in certain areas. Another part of that is you've got to look to, as a state, what do we have that can best serve our population? West Virginia's got resources X, Y, Z. Ohio's got, and you start to look at those policies and say, all right, where can we get ahead the furthest, the fastest in that transition? And so, yes, from me, you're certainly going to get a commitment to working towards, and as Harry said, you got to get 51 other votes in there, building coalitions to push that agenda forward. I'm passionate about seeing where we're going for the future and not keeping looking behind us.
Thank you.
All right. Let me start by your question. Yes. All right. With respect to, it's, like you said, the technology issues are storage and transmission. Right. Where we have the population is not where we have the best generation resources for alternative energies. Solar panels work best in the desert. Populations are in the Northeast. The technology to store electricity is critical. Tesla, we've got the biggest battery installation, or at least it was 2 years ago, in the world, right along where we've got our wind turbines. 1.5 million batteries. The biggest they can make them are about a C-size battery. They're in an array, and they're there to hold the grid and then be charged by the grid when it's powered. And how long it lasts? 15 minutes, right? So those are the technological challenges. There's no question in my mind. I've seen predictions that we hit the tipping point by 2100, all right? That's within our kids' lifetime as far as this climate, and I believe it. So with respect to the present, and what everybody said, what Harry said is so true, and you never see it more than when you're trying to stand up in front of 6 people who don't want to listen to you and persuade them. They don't. How did you say it, Harry? They they don't believe what they hear what they believe. All right, and so building that consensus probably not going to happen in my lifetime and a lot of lifetimes in this room. But with regard to starting that conversation, starting that education, starting that persuasion, it has to happen now. I was persuaded when I went to school and took the science and tech and environment and just all of this and the distinction between environmental issues, which we really haven't even talked about tonight because that's not our purpose. So, yes.
Thank you. Okay, I saw Kendra's hand, then Simon.
Sure. So this is one of those situations where you want to be able to make decisions for the right reasons. You want to do the right thing. You want to make the altruistic decision. Ideally, and sometimes that decision is not not everyone agrees on it, or it's not economically beneficial. This is one of those areas where we can make the altruistic right decision and make the argument that it's economically beneficial, right? It's a bad idea to stay on the course we're on for any longer than we're on it, right? It is a bad idea, it is short-sighted, and it's not going to get us to what we want, our freedom to stay in West Virginia. We know that we can't keep doing things the same way that we've done them, and if we're smart and thoughtful and make the pitch that it's economically beneficial, we will get there. So we just need people who are willing to go out there and say, and this in my case, go to Congress and say, this benefits West Virginia and West Virginians because economically we are too focused on one portfolio. And if we diversify that into renewables, for example, if that makes sense, into industrial hemp, into cannabis, we will have a resource-rich state like we have now that is also economically stable. And that's what we need to do. To me, it's actually, this is one of those things that's fairly straightforward and it's a difficult thing to achieve, but to get people on board, I think it's actually it's a win-win. It's the right thing to do, and it makes sense economically.
Yeah, and I want to reemphasize that economic message. So the short answer to your question is yes. I think we need to add something to our pitch. When I say we, I mean the environmental movement, this movement to alternative energies, and it's jobs. I think it gets a little confused. A lot of the folks that, and the voters that are resistant to this change in our state, jobs are a personal thing. It has a lot to do with your self-worth. It's how you take care of your family. It's often a tradition in your family going about generations. So there's gonna be a tendency there to be loyal to it. But if we can approach it and the most frequent question in any general election is, how are you going to bring jobs to the area? And we say, well, have you heard of alternative energy? Have you seen the manufacturing opportunities here? If we start making, windmill turbines here, have you seen what we can do if we start making solar panels here? Have you seen other uses that even if you want to go to metallurgic coal, that can tie into the alternative energy industry? So we need to start changing our pitch a little to the general voter, saying, this is where the new jobs are going to be. That's one of the reasons we have to make this transition. Look what the rest of the world's doing, And the other half of that comes into the legislature part is a lot of the other countries are creating a demand and the industries are following that, and we're not doing that. So when you come to me and say, well, how are we going to do that? We can talk about, look at Germany or some of these other countries that are saying, hey, by this date, all cars on the road have to meet these requirements, and it's going to be electric cars. They've just created a demand that's going to push this faster. Some of these countries here's our schedule for what percentage of our grid needs to be charged by renewables. That's causing the demand that forces that manufacturer to come in, and then you have a jobs pitch. So you need to ask us as legislatures, and I'm totally behind it okay, we're going to have a different kind of pitch. It's going to be, there's a lot of moral reasons that we need to do this with climate change. There's a lot of really great economic reasons and a lot of great jobs reasons we can do this, and it's going to benefit our state. But to couple that with real legislation that helps drive the demand in that direction. And if we don't do that, it's going to feel too slow. So we need to start talking about how do we create that demand through legislation, like things about percentage of our grid that's from renewables and what kind of cars we're driving.
Well, I saw Harry stand up first. Let's get Harry, and then, well, you're already standing up. However you guys want to do it. Tom, go ahead.
Thank you. All of these ideas are really great, and I believe they have a future, but unfortunately that future may be too far away. My recollection, being as old as I am, is that when the environmental situation or movement started, and some of the first agreements, there was almost, the United States reduced its pollution And China and India almost didn't reduce theirs at all. And the point is that unless everybody in the world starts doing this, the fact that pollutions are getting into the air, the air movement is going to bring them to here, whether we're polluting or not. So we've got to make it worldwide. And that's going to be tough. Our Republican friends are not going to be pleased with that.
If I could comment on that just quickly, though, China and India have made major advancements in renewable energy, and as the countries who industrialized much sooner than they did, we can't really condescend to them and say, well, we industrialized with fossil fuels, but you have no right to do that. But we're not even keeping pace with what they're doing, and we industrialized 150 years before they did. So it's
that's great.
It's a big challenge. That
Well,
we're
yeah,
not meeting.
I mean, I wish we were doing it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Harry, go ahead.
Now, if we can go back to your original question, which was?
The original question was, could you support this speedy transition in the legislature to renewable energy, to being on fossil fuels for as little time as possible, basically?
Right. And that is something that you have to be careful about as a legislator as opposed to a citizen. What we are on is a big aircraft carrier that's kind of moving along in this, direction like this. And what we would like to do is turn it like this. I can't do that by saying, I'm going to turn this aircraft carrier around in the legislature. Because if I do that, I lose all my credibility to get those 51 votes. So I can't say, yes, I will take this position universally, because I might accomplish nothing. But if we figure out what we can accomplish, can we get energy credits in the tax code? Can we force the utilities to give you credit when you use solar power in the daytime and put it back? Then we can do one thing at a time, and I can work the room. I got to work with Archmore's two grandsons that are in the legislature, whatever. And I can say, look, how about if we do this? I can go with you on this idea that you have for law enforcement or whatever, if you'll, will you listen to me on this? So yes, I mean, in principle, I can do what you asked, but I can't come out and say, well, we're going to make all these changes, we got to do this. I'll be the voice in the wilderness that is what my law partner described. Yeah, I'll be on the front page, but I won't accomplish a darn thing for you. It is you, Eric, and each of you that come out, and you can do that. You can do that, but sometimes as the person in the legislature, I'm not going to be able to go out there and beat the drum as hard as you would like to see it beat, because if I do that, I'll lose credibility and I will accomplish nothing.
Sure.
So that was why I wanted to specify your question.
Right, and understanding, and I'm gonna go to Gene here in just a second, and back to Judy. Understanding that public policy and even in the courts, this is incremental. It's about coalition building. It's about steps. It's about. My question is mostly in principle. Can you aim for that goal?
Oh, and that's easy for all of us to answer.
Aiming for that goal in incremental ways.
All of us can answer that easily. I just wanted to clarify that it won't be as obvious that we are doing that if we are in there, because there are things that you can do and really help that we can't do because we will lose our ability to help.
Right, but you're dedicated to that end goal. Go ahead, Gene.
I guess as I've been sitting here listening to a lot of the good things that have been said, I wonder, Mr. Deitzler, and others have kind of described that you're there trying to put your own coalition together in order to get good things done, kind of working on your own to do various things. And what I don't hear is the idea that, say, all of the Democrats who get through the primary would work together on some kind of a common pledge around these issues. And I was hearing some of those parts of the pledge today, that maybe organizations like the Coalition for Public Lands and the Rivers Coalition and the Sierra Club and others could work with candidates to develop some kind of a pledge that would be something like, we can't keep doing things the way we've done them in the past. I think there's a lot of consensus among West Virginians. They don't want to choose between jobs and the environment. Nobody wants to have to work at things that make them sick. And the natural gas industry makes people sick. It's like DuPont, you know. I mean, there's documented health effects of the natural gas industry, just like there is with coal and all. And so we have to choose. This is our industry, and we know it's going to make us sick, and it's going to ruin our environment. So we don't want that. We've never wanted that. I mean, you know. So a pledge that would articulate, we know we can't keep doing things the way we've done them in the past. We know we have to transition to a sustainable economy. For too long, West Virginians have had to choose between jobs and a healthy environment. I think West Virginians would agree with all that stuff. And it's a positive vision that doesn't say anything specific about exactly what you're going to do, but that it articulates the idea that jobs and a healthy environment don't have to be, they're not enemies. We're not enemies here of our fellow West Virginians, but that we could agree, and that there would be a broad coalition of candidates that would agree we don't have to choose between jobs and the environment. And we can work on a healthy future, and I pledge to do that, along with my fellow Democratic candidates or whomever would be there. I think the time is right for the environmental community and others to come together and say, these are false choices, that we're moving toward the inevitable future because the market is driving us in that direction, and the climate. And to just say it, put it out there, because people, in their heart of hearts, a lot of people know that. So I just think it would be a really neat project to work on.
Judy, we're going to have to wrap up with Judy because we're coming up on 8:30. When Judy's had a chance to ask her question and have it answered.
I'm afraid this isn't a question, it's a comment.
Okay.
One is, I don't think that electric cars are really economically and environmentally feasible until we have local, renewable, recharging stations for them in parking lots and on houses, because there's a tremendous transmission loss, which we had those renewables that would not be there. Secondly, California is a good example of a state that has been working for about 30 years and is making great headway on water conservation, and the utility companies, I don't believe, have built a new plant. They have conserved, they have insulated, they have put solar panels on houses, they have put in energy efficient appliances and light bulbs, which the people pay through their utility bills, and they are well on the way to having renewable energy.
So the conservation and energy efficiency go hand in hand with the transition.
Conservation is a win-win.
Right, no matter what.
Yeah, and so they have been working, and the laws have been written so that the utility bills can, with the owner's consent, install the equipment, and they're paid for through the utility bill, which is usually not higher than it was before.
And the utilities working with them, which in West Virginia is unheard of.
Yeah.
Simon raised his hand. I'm going to let him answer, and then we do have to kind of wrap up here. I want everybody to be able to visit the tables, but go ahead, Simon.
Super quick comment. One, I'm a bit of a test subject on this because I drive an electric car. And I'll tell you so far, and we do have some plug-in stations, and my electric bill is much cheaper than I would have been paying with gas. And my wife, other than us worrying that I forget to plug it in and we'll be on the side of the road one day, it's actually going pretty well. Secondly, as us working together, just as a small example, even before the primary, we have a cleanup trash event this Sunday at 1 o'clock at First Presbyterian in Parkersburg, but I just wanted to point that out as we are getting together and we are doing things and we are trying to show leadership as a group. And third, it's just, I think that totally hits the nail on the head. We have an environmental tent now. If we start pulling in a jobs message to that it's an artificial choice, and that we can be as much of an environmental movement as a jobs movement, we're going to pick up momentum like we haven't seen before. And that's a really important part of this message.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, let's have a round of applause for the candidates. Really, truly appreciate you all coming. It really means the world. We do have 3 great tables of information back here from the Sierra Club, from Mid-Ohio Valley Climate Action, and from West Virginians for Public Lands / West Virginia Rivers Coalition.
I want to remind most of the candidates that the League of Women Voters is having candidate night on Monday.
You're going to be very busy for the primary, there's no doubt. Thank you all for coming. Please come back to the tables. Thanks again.
I'm so sorry.